and I'd like to invite you to do this, is to see our conversations as a kind of ongoing, what I would say, speculations into possibilities, speculations into possible futures. And to do that, I will make a few statements as I go along, which is not necessarily to get answers, but things that emerge or that inspire me. And so I want to respond, not a response, but to put out there to Mikkel, who asked the question about global citizenship, who will fund it? And I want to respond with something that was said at a conference in Leicester last year, I think, or no, this year, where it was asked exactly this question, who will fund it? And the question is, isn't it imperative, rather than thinking who will fund it, isn't it imperative that we find strategies in our museums to be able to do this kind of work, that hopeful work that you think is not going to be funded after Trump? Isn't it imperative that we try to do that hopeful work? Because if we don't do that hopeful work, then what then are we doing? I'm just putting it out there, yeah? And so it is not this project, and what this project does, and it probably goes back to what Iris said earlier, is that it does not think of Europe as one thing. It thinks of 10 different museums within 10 different political space that shares some part of a history, but actually do things very differently. And what this project is trying to do is try and understand the differences and similarities, as well as try to understand what might we learn from each other to do differently. So it is not a homogenized idea. And the next thing that I'd like to put out there is whether or not we need some aspirational categories to work with. There is a book by Terry Angleton where he critiques optimism. And I've come to agree with him that whether the glass is half full or it's half empty, it is still half. And for some of us, no matter how we look at it, it is just half. And so, in his words as well, what he proposes is that we might have to move beyond optimism, because there is, and I agree with that, very little to be optimistic about sometimes. But we have to move to the possibility of hope, because hope does something else. It demands something else. And so I will say anyway, for us in this museum, global citizenship is not a fact. It is an aspirational category, something that we think we can move towards as we struggle to find out what is our role. And I'd like to ask that question about what are we aspiring to as institutions, rather than any congratulations about what have we done. That's what I'd like to put out there. Our next presenter is Lina Issa. She is an artist who doesn't produce physical work, but produces interactions, produces thought moments, produces critical spaces to think with. Lina, one of the parts of the SWICH project is that several of our institutions have invited artists into our spaces to help think with us and to produce work, whatever that work is, with us as we think about what our institutions can be for the present and future. Lina is not necessarily going to talk about our presentation. We've invited other artists as well, but rather, our project here, but rather, or I don't think so, but rather about our practice. And one of the reasons for doing that, we have 3 artists present, is to try and ask the question in a way, what if we were to mobilize some of the thoughts, that imaginative possibilities that artists mobilize? What can that do for us as an institution? So I welcome Lina, and I don't think you have a PowerPoint, right? No, but please, thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Thanks for inviting me. Actually, this talk or presentation might sound personal, so I kind of warn you, or allow me to be personal. I ask your permission to be personal and to put myself, my subject, as also a subject of discussion within all these issues that we are talking about and dealing with. So I'd like to call this a pursuit of an encounter. My name is Lina Issa. My I does not want to be without the we. I only believe in vulnerability and in empathy. And questions that inspire me most are, what if I took your place? Can I feel what you feel? And can my body remember what your body remembers? I was born in 1981 in Beirut, and I grew up during the civil war and the Israeli occupation in a coastal town in the south of Lebanon. I long daily to the sea, to the laugh of my mother, to the hands of my father, to the sitting posture of my brother, and to the smell of fresh olive oil. I live since 2003 in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and I came here for my master's in visual arts. Here, I've grown to understand that my body is my home, and it's often weak, confused, and sick under the pressure of identity. But for the rest of that, my body carries me and places me in the middle of life. So Wayne and Lisa asked me if I've intentionally stated next to my name in the biography Lebanese artist, instead of Lebanese/Dutch, for in the context of this conference, it is a political statement. I've actually just copied my biography from an old document. But 2 years ago, I got my Dutch passport. For that, I needed to let go of my Lebanese passport. And until then, it would not have been normal to say Lebanese/Dutch, but Lebanese based in the Netherlands, in spite of the fact that I've been living here for 14 years. So, what I got is the Dutch passport, and I politically choose for passport, not nationality. And I've lost my Lebanese passport, not nationality. And although I had, I had to make an oath that I will serve the king, the queen, and the nation when that's really necessary. And two main things I would like to do politically with this passport, and I'm working on that. One is offering the possibility for someone who doesn't have the freedom to travel to get a passport or a residence permit here in Europe. And the second is visiting the village where my grandmother comes from, where she had to evacuate in 1948 in Palestine. So as a Lebanese, I wasn't able to travel to the occupied Palestine, and with my Dutch passport, I theoretically can. So these plans I have now. But in 2006, here in the Netherlands, I needed a stand-in, someone to take my place. For back then, as a student from Lebanon, I have been denied my residence permit for the Netherlands for strictly bureaucratic reasons. And since I appealed against this decision, I have not been able to leave the Netherlands and re-enter the country. So this decision created a state of exception that excluded me from my own home country and placed me outside this contemporary zone of mobility. Not being able to travel home myself, I cast a replacement and sent Aitana, a Spanish girl, to Lebanon for 10 days as my stand-in, messenger, and recording device. She visited different people, my family and friends, and traced the places of memory that constitute the idea of home to me. So Aitana performed a lot of tasks I gave her in a handwritten notebook, And she wrote impressions and experiences in a notebook as well. Both notebooks, I don't know if you all can see them, they're here, play a major role in the performance we created with the title Where We Are Not. So, Where We Are Not is not about anywhere, but about those places we carry with us in our bodies. The places that are part of us and as well that have made us who we are. So in my notebook, for example, I asked her, smell my mom's breath after coffee. Touch the plastic table cover at the Sea Cafe in my hometown. Smell my grandma's veil, exactly at that spot where she ties it together behind her left ear. Feel the Lebanese bread as you fold it and dip it in oil. Smell the cooking rice as you climb up the stairs to the house. Look at my friend's walk, Bilal, from behind. Look at the corners of the mouth of my smiling aunt. And on and on. So I'm wondering if I can look at this. I've been exercising, looking at these notebooks as diasporic objects or as possible objects to have in a museum, and what it would mean to have one or to have two next to each other to these narratives. And I would like to ask someone of you to flip through the book and choose a page or a line to read to us. He was fast. And I will hold the microphone for you here.
Relations with Syria. The Syrians played a major role in Lebanese civil war, helping different sides against each other, just like the French, Americans, and Israelis were supporting different sides too, political religious groups, all in order to define and achieve their own interest in the politics of the region and the role Lebanon plays in that. Syria is a Muslim Sunni country. After the civil war, the Syrian army entered Lebanon as, quote, peacekeeping forces, making sure that Lebanese won't kill each other. Well, since then, until last year, this time, the Syrian government has been influencing our political and economical decisions. No Lebanese can decide anything without the agreement of the Syrians. With that, the Syrian government kept a very powerful position in the Middle East, peace discussions with Israel, etc., since they decided for two countries in the region of Arab-Israeli conflict.
Thank you. This is in 2006 and it has drastically changed. And I think we cannot say anymore Syria is a Sunni Muslim country. This is part of the book where at the beginning it's an introduction where there is a lot of I will shift to this one, where there's a lot of description of the region and the context and how I read the history of the place. And then there are chapters day by day, from day 1 to day 10, how she would move, what she would do, and the people she would meet. So I would like to talk a bit now about her narrative, about her position as a stand-in. So she wrote in her notebook, which she wrote in Spanish, which I wasn't able to read or understand after she came back. So I always needed her to translate her experience again to me. So she writes, my whole attention was asked to face Lina's life, Lina's experiences, Lina's remarks, comments, and also the main life events and the main characters in her life. I talked about Lina, I heard about Lina, I defended her, I imagined her, justified her, discovered her, understood her, I cried for her, and I even loved her there. But I did not know her before going to Lebanon. We were not friends or knew a lot about each other. So I met Lina through the stories of the people, through stories of love and pain, of memories, but also through evidences such as smells of her clothes in the cupboard or pictures. But I also met Lina in the spaces and moments where the narratives she did about herself, a person or a situation, collided with my own opinion about this person or situation. But what about me? My image in Lebanon is formed in a different way. I am not how I describe myself. I am not through my answers. I do not have the control of how I want people to perceive me. I am not allowed to narrate myself, magnifying these events of my life that have formed me. Rather, my presence, or Aitana, is defined through how I listen, how I contemplate, how I react, how I touch, how I support, how I am being in the present tense, without explanations, narrations of my past or desires. Lina and I were able to become very close there, where we are not. So, next to instructions on how to inhabit my place, I also gave her things like tools or triggers to help unfold a familiar common space with the people she met. Like a lemon with some salt, like a soap with a specific smell. And I also gave her like a music tape to play in the car with my mother of a specific Egyptian pop singer that we always used to listen to while driving to her hometown. And then Aitana described this moment, and she said, the moment I put the tape in the car, a lot of joy kind of took over the face of your mother. But then a few seconds later, she pushed it out and she said, no, this is not the tape we always listen to, it's another one. And she took that other tape and put it and started teaching her the songs. So, another moment in the process as well is where, for example, my father, not having read the instructions, but he knows that they exist, he woke her up at 7 in the morning with a kiss on the forehead and an orange juice, and he said, come, we're going for a walk on the beach. So he holds her hand and they walk on the beach, and he starts singing the song he used to sing for me and my brother to sleep in bed. And she recognized that because I was trying to teach it to her before she goes there, in case she would be able to sing it at some moment. So again there, like in this project, authorship, ownership was constantly negotiated. Who is writing the narrative? Who is directing this? Which specific part of it was constantly changing. And the affective space was continuously shaken, and responsibility towards each other in the space that contains us or that we are carrying together was constantly shifting. So that was at times painful, at times confusing, at times overwhelming, but it managed to create an inclusive space for each one involved in a different way, but still we were all giving shape to that. And it managed also to transform that where we are not space into an active space that we can share instead of being cut off from that. It broke the classical borders of where we belong, because for me, in my notebook, that belonging is very much holding on, not wanting to lose that part, which is like kind of a fear or even a trauma that a lot of migrants experience, that you would lose that part. Yet in this process, by sharing it, by having another body embody it and rewriting it all together, it was possible to let go of that fear and holding on, and to have a much more diverse and active experience. And how much time do I have, Lisa? Well, after this project, I went further exploring this location and how it reforms our identity and our experience of self and relationship to place. And I wanted actually to explore this location itself as a place to inhabit. So I started another project with that question, what if I take your place? So I placed an advertisement in the newspaper asking people, can I take your place for an hour, a day, or a week? And I received like 40 different reactions, and I took the place of 13 people, among which is a divorced woman and a mother, a garbage man, a curator, an alter ego, a girlfriend, a daughter, a pensioned man. Also a 62-year-old woman asked me if I can take her place for one day to suffer in her place, to feel pain and sad and for one day, because she had lost her partner and her job, and she said, if you can worry and have negative, sad thoughts in my place for one day, then I can use that day to indulge unconditionally in something that would bring me joy. Also, a daughter losing her father asked, we never say I love you, but now he has 2 months to live, and how to fill that space. Maybe what if you take my place and tell him that I love you, and ask him, have I done it well in my life, Papa? So for me, the question is, how can then the museum and collections activate that relationship between where we are not, where the objects of the collection are not, and where we are now and where the objects are now? How could identity within the space of the ethnographic museums shift from being Lebanese/Dutch, encompassing all places that have informed and formed who I am, which influence the way I imagine and narrate myself beyond geographical border and macro-political powers? How could it address and activate the micropolitics of the body, of the subject, and of identity? And how could it become a space where emotional knowledge and empathy is stimulated in the visitors and in the people working in the museum, enforcing, like, making that empathy as a bridge for differences and informing the common ground that these different communities need to find each other in. So I'm entertaining this thought of, like, applying the subject stand-in relationship to the museum and the communities it tries to represent. So could the museum stand in for those communities and feel what they feel, remember what they remember? Could it embody their identities, emotions, and life details for them? What does it take to do that? So I feel that for a museum to be able to stand in, it has to confront in the direct active presence of those people, as much as in their absence, its own identity and modes of presentation and representation. So it has to negotiate appearance and disappearance, of authorship and ownership on history, memory, body, imagination, and narratives. And it needs, as it is trying to do now, to truly feel an urgency, politically and emotionally, that each person working at the museum reflects on their own cultural luggage and position towards other cultures, to acknowledge difference, power relations, and misunderstandings, then to sit down and exercise together with the people, making scripts of possible replacements of each other, and for transforming that space of where we are not into an inclusive space for multiple narratives. And that's what we try to do in the residency. You're very ambitious. So groundless as I am, my work locates itself and me in the limbs of this unstable factor called the other, you. So where to go and how to go on is dependent on my encounter with you. And a desire to disappear in your geography always results in a hyper-presence. Borrowing each other's absence or presence for a narration, a confrontation, a placement, a replacement, a displacement, or a withdrawal, or even a repetition of your and my reality, points at things that escape us, things that we are, but have not yet become. Thank you.